All right. So, ontological argument. You have here the classical misconception is that ontological arguments they assume that existence is a predicate. So why is that a bad assumption?
Yeah, the idea is that we can't just say God must exist because he's the greatest possible being, and it's greater to exist than not exist because existence itself is not a predicate or a property things have on top of all their other properties. It's things exist first, so to speak, and then
Yeah.
have properties. Existence is not itself among the properties that things have.
Hmm.
So the ontological argument fails. Now, um, a few things about this. The first is that, well, some people actually do think existence is a property or a predicate.
Yeah.
Uh, Weirdly, this sort of like existence is not a predicate slogan has reached unquestionable dogma status in philosophy more than any other principle in philosophy, at least when we're talking about the ontological argument.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just leave aside for the second that, this might actually be a debatable question. Um, it's now widely recognized that there are multiple different versions of the ontological argument in Anselm's writings, and some don't even depend on this assumption that existence is a predicate.
Hmm.
What philosophers have come to appreciate is that all we need to assume is that necessary existence is a predicate.
Yeah.
That is, necessity or necessary existence is a property. Necessity is a property, and obviously it is. So now we can just say that, well, if God exists as a perfect being, he would have the property of necessity. God would be a necessary being. But what's possibly necessary is necessary. There's that modal inference again. So the success of the ontological argument all hangs on whether it's possible that God exists.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't even need this original proslogion 2 version of Anselm's argument to talk about the ontological argument. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you so like classically and sometimes I get sick of this one too, like
Mhm.
Ganilo and Anselm, right? So like can you just so we've updated necessary existence instead of just existence. That's the property.
Yeah.
Can you update the perfect island argument? Has that been done to say like, well, can you just slap on necessary existence to a necessarily existent island?
Well, that seems to start playing havoc, it seems to me, with the concept of an island. We have we have grains of sand, we have palm trees, we have beachy shores, we have coconuts. All these things are not necessarily existent.
Hmm.
They come into existence and pass out of existence. So islands themselves are not going to be candidates for necessary beings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. It just would like wreak havoc on our whole view of the world, right? Like because it's like,
Yeah.
well, every other island is contingent, but this one's necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. So in order to establish good parity arguments like this, you have to find a kind of being that is such that if it exists at all, it plausibly exists necessarily.
Yeah.
And all these other parodies, the pizza, the flying spaghetti monster, the islands,
Yeah.
they don't have that property. Now, what does have that property are abstract objects.
Yeah.
So so you could have a parity argument there, and I think there's a real problem there. You could run an exactly parallel ontological argument for the existence of abstract objects.
Hmm.
And so how you square that with God's existence then and aseity and all that stuff turns into its own
Yeah.
question. Mhm.
Okay, can I ask you about that? Like, do you have a preferred way of solving that?
Uh, I I I kind of plot for a sort of divine conceptualism. Yeah,
My
I just
man.
think,
That's good.
yeah, I think that it's no coincidence that we have these parallel arguments for abstract objects because those ultimately depend on a necessary being, namely God. So they are themselves reflections of a divine being.
Yeah. Do you this is a whole different thing and we can totally let's stop it like a little short, but do you go in for like theistic activism? You think God like invented circles, or are they just necessarily like part of his thinking, or they already
Yeah,
exist there?
I would say that there's some sort of necessary product of his thing, and not even product. They're just sort of like necessary structural cognitive equipment that God
Yeah,
has.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That seems pretty close to Welty's thought. That's good, man. I like that. I can get down with that. All right, so we have got a super chat here, and it's from Kingdom Kid. Thank you for the super chat to the philosophizing grappler, and it could be grapplers because Chad was also a wrestler as well.
I was.
I love that, dude.
So that's right.
That's why we connect so well because you're super hardcore, dude. I love that about you.
We're wrestlers. We got snapping turtles. You know.
Yes, dude. We both have alligator snapping turtles. I love that.
That's right.
That's so good. So we talked about the class. This is a classic misconception that has been updated. I guess if you're still going for Anselm, then I guess you can still raise it against an Anselmian critic. But there's some pretty good ones out there too. But there's this contemporary misconception too that modal ontological arguments require S5, and so maybe we go in for S4 or different. So then we can evade the argument here. So what do you make of that contemporary misconception?
So it's completely misconceived. I mean, in its most generic form, the modal ontological argument boils down to this. Premise 1, either it's necessary that God exists, or it's not possible that God exists. Premise 2, it's possible that God exists. And it follows from those two premises, God exists. And the main premise there is that it's possible that God exists. That's what we're interested in trying to defend. That's where basically all the cutting edge stuff on the ontological argument is right now, is trying to defend the possibility of God's existence, why we should think that that's more reasonable to believe than its complement. It's not possible that God exists. Okay, so you take that generic modal ontological argument. Do we need S5, the modal system S5, for this argument to be valid? No, this is demonstrably false. This generic argument is valid in all non-trivial modal systems, from the very weakest, which is called T, and then on up to systems B, S4, and S5. So I've given you links to where we can demonstrate the proofs, where we can actually generate the proofs in real time, demonstrating the validity of this argument in all modal systems T and above.
All right. Can we see that? Is it showing up? There we go.
Yeah, so that was that. Yep, it's T. So
do I need to run it back or something?
Yeah, there you go.
Look at that. It's kind of quick. Can I don't know if I can slow it down, but look at that. All you nerds out there can read it.
So what you see in the bar up there is just the premises of the argument. And then the blue check mark there is the relation of reflexivity, which is the essential relation to modal system T. So we're in modal system T. There's your premises. Is the conclusion G, God's existence, is that valid from those premises? You run the argument. Yes, it is. And now go up to modal system B.
All right, 1 second here.
And then so in addition to reflexivity, modal system B adds symmetry. And these are what are called accessibility relations in modal logic. Modal logic is all about what worlds are accessible to other worlds depending on these different formal properties. So we have reflexivity and symmetry clicked. Whoa, look at that. It's valid in system B as well.
Okay.
Now, if we want to go up to modal system S4, then we have reflexivity and transitivity.
It can't be in S4, man. It can't be there too. I don't believe it. I'll believe when I see it.
The proof in S4, I think, is actually the same as in B, because the relevant accessibility relation is just going to be reflexivity.
Okay.
So there you go.
I think I have it on. Oh yeah. Okay. Symmetric. Gotcha.
Well, S4 is reflexive and transitive, not symmetric and transitive. But it does still entail symmetric and transitive. What would be symmetric and transitive? I don't know. Well, it's valid in that system too.
Awesome. All right, now we got S5, which
is
S5,
like... and then you just click. He's got a nice option there to click universal. So it's reflexive, symmetric, and transitive. The accessibility relations in S5. And there you go. That's the simplest deduction in S5, because S5 gives you most accessibility relations. Well, I mean, the whole debate is because a lot of philosophers think that S5 intuitively captures our intuitions about the metaphysics of modality.
Oh,
That's what most philosophers just sort of unreflectively use when they do modality, when they do modal metaphysics. And so, oh, well, it turns out the modal ontological argument is valid in S5. Now we have this controversy about, oh, is S5 all that good? Let's backtrack. Maybe it's not that good anyway. So, but these debates about S5 and the ontological argument are completely irrelevant because the main modal inferences are valid in much weaker systems. So I say
that's crazy. This is like totally brand new to me, because I always hear that the contemporary misconception that it's just S5, and so we go in for something else. And this is like part of my summer project is Bayes and modal logic. So I'm like, all right, well, let me get back to you on that. But so what's that website that we had pulled up? Where can someone look into what we just ran for them?
yeah, this is a really cool website. It's just umsu.de/trees/. And this is a proof generator. It does propositional, predicate, and modal logic. So as long as you know the operators and the inference rules, you can check your proofs. I wish I had
Awesome.
this in undergrad and graduate school when I did all my logic courses.
Yeah,
But this is just an amazing website.
that's awesome. So, man, that's so crazy. So, I mean, what do you make of the argument? We weren't planning on doing like a full like tier list or anything like that, but it seems pretty good. I guess Swinburne wouldn't like it because he doesn't think God's a necessary being.
Yeah. Well, I think it all comes down to this possibility premise, right? Is it possible that God exists?
Hmm.
And do arguments for the possibility of God's existence, do they just beg the question, are those just arguments for God's existence? This is the way like Cameron Bertuzzi just framed it over on his page.
Yeah.
And I think, no, it's not like that, because it's not like necessary existence is part of the concept of God in the same way that bachelorhood is part of the concept of being an unmarried male. These are different ways of the conceptual connections in both cases are different. We need a reason to think that God, if God exists, is a necessary being in a way that we don't need a reason to think that an unmarried man is a bachelor. That's just part
Yeah.
of the concept.
Yeah.
No, we need to actually argue for that premise that if God exists, God is a necessary being. So you got to appeal to like perfect being theology considerations or something like that. But that's precisely what doesn't make this argument beg the question, contrary to what a lot of people seem to think.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It brings up another comment from Digital Gnosis, who's just tearing it up in the comment section, which I appreciate. Someone should go do a parallel ontological argument for Oppie's necessary initial physical state theory, than which nothing greater can be conceived. Which just kind of brings out that point you were just making, where I can leave that up too. Yeah, just necessary being isn't synonymous with God, right? It's not in the same way that unmarried man and bachelor, like
No,
that
it's
just
not.
is the analytic truth.
That's correct. And so that's absolutely correct, because necessary beings of themselves per se, um, even though I would want to argue in a different way, I would want to argue from abstract objects to God. You can have necessary beings that are not God,
Yeah.
numbers, sets, properties, propositions, and so on.
Right.